As a Malaysian, I would like to welcome everyone for their attendance. I believe that UMNO believes in being open, in being observed, in being friendly with all the countries of the world, and also with political parties, some of which, of course, have got different ideologies than UMNO itself. And this new thing is introduced in which, before the UMNO General Assembly, UMNO can choose somebody to try and give UMNO a good image, a good reputation. I'm not the correct person to ask, but nevertheless they asked me, and I hope I can paint a better picture of UMNO than other people. Thank you. They have chosen this very fantastic subject for me to speak. It is about conflict and conciliation in the politics, in the people's politics, looking back or looking forward. This is the story of mankind itself. Ever since man emerged in this world, they have always wanted to seek security for themselves. Probably first they wanted to be secured from attacks by animals. But having discovered that by coming together and increasing their numbers, they are better able to protect themselves from animals, then they have to find ways of living together. Now, you cannot live together without having somebody to have the right and the power to impose rules and regulations and laws. And so it is that the human community developed systems of government. First, it is a government of the mighty over the rest, where might is right. The strongest individual in the community becomes the leader, the ruler, and imposes his will on the community. Obviously, within the community, there will be conflicts, and it is for the ruler to settle the conflicts in one way or another, probably by executing those he didn't like. And this developed into tyranny, terrorism by the ruler because of the power given to him. And this, over time, became so overwhelming that people who live under tyrannies, under tyrants, learn to fear their tyrants rather than each other. They have to suffer much because tyrants do things or exercise their power in ways that actually reduce the security of the people. Over time, they tried to change the system of absolute rule by individuals, either because they were strong or because they somehow or other had achieved a certain status in society and were highly regarded and even worshipped by society. And so comes a system of monarchies, of absolute monarchies, of absolute kings and chiefs and emperors. Again, the problem of security of the people was not ensured simply because kings and emperors and chiefs begin to abuse their power and to oppress their people. They begin to abuse their power for their own good. They misuse their authority and the finances of the community in order to have a good life only for themselves and not for the people. Over time, the big people became disenchanted and decided that they should rule the country by themselves. And so came the concept of a republic, a return to the public. In other words, it is the public, the people, who must exercise power within the community. The belief is that the people, of course, would care for the people. They would not behave like the kings and emperors and chiefs. They would be concerned about the welfare of the people. But then how do the people rule themselves? Then came the idea of a democracy. A democracy is a system whereby demos, or the people, will rule themselves. Well, in the Greek cities of old, the numbers of people were small, and they were able to settle their problems in a forum where they would discuss the issues at hand. Even then, they denied the rights of the slaves, they denied the right of the women, they denied the rights of people of a younger age, and they gave power only to landowners, people who have a vested interest in the peace of the community. Obviously, there were people who would feel oppressed because only the rich landowners would exercise power. And even among the rich landowners, there was no agreement. There were disputes, and sometimes these disputes led to factions, and the factions fight each other. Obviously, the system was not working, and new ideas came because the French Revolution based itself on equality, fraternity, and freedom. But all these three, although they sound very good, they can also lead to abuses of power. For example, in a democracy, everyone is supposed to be equal, but then they do not agree with each other. There were conflicts between different groups because of ideology, because of loyalty to certain individuals who lead them. There were conflicts, and if these conflicts are not properly settled, there will be violence and people will lose their lives. So even democracy does not guarantee security for the people. They are at their wits' ends and they come up with rights. Within democracy there must be rights. Human rights, rights to freedom of speech, rights to free press, and all kinds of rights to ownership of property, all kinds of rights were accorded the people. But then when you give rights to people to talk, to have free speech, to have free media, then within the free speech ambience, they come up with differences in their ideas, leading to a break-up of human society. People begin to dislike other people within the society, and this could lead to conflicts. It was decided, therefore, that we should base democracy on the rule of majority. But again, the rule of majority may be oppressive for the minority. And now you give rights to the minority. You give rights to people who are groups which are smaller. What rights have they? The rights to protest. Nowadays, we see protest being carried out. People take to the streets to protest, disrupt business, disrupt the economy, prevent the economy from growing, prevent people from enjoying peace and stability. But then it is their rights, And democracy guarantees them these rights to demonstrate, to undermine the minds of people through their orations, through their speeches, and through the use of the media. Again, despite giving human rights and taking care of the rights of the minority, society becomes unstable. Today, what we are seeing is that while elections can determine the majority who should be given the right to rule, but almost immediately the minority undermines the right of the majority to rule, and there will be conflicts. And this can be resolved through the rights to demonstrate, the rights to free speech. But the rights to demonstrate and free speech can also be abused by certain quarters who would like to make use of this minority dissatisfaction in order to install him as the ruler, against the wishes of the majority. And so today we see what we call the Arab Spring. Now, what happened in the Arab Spring? Of course, for a long time, these countries were not democratic, but eventually the minority decided that they must overthrow the government and install a new government which would give them freedom. And so they demonstrated, they take to the streets day in and day out, they disrupt business, they disrupt the work of government, and eventually the government comes down. That they have now achieved their objective of bringing down the tyrant. By having brought down the tyrant, they must install somebody else to exercise their power. But how do they install somebody else? Of course, many answer that democracy will do this. Democracy would determine who should rule the country. And they have elections. And when the elections are held, perhaps a majority will determine that one group of people, one party, one individual should rule the country because he has the support of the majority. Unfortunately, while we believe in democracy, that we should allow the majority to rule, as I said, unfortunately, we do not accept really that the majority should rule. We will then exercise our rights to disrupt the whole country. We take to the streets again. Day in and day out, there will be demonstrations in the streets. They will complain, of course, that the elections was fraudulent, that the government cheated, that the people, this group which won cheated in the election. Therefore, we should have another election. Therefore, we should bring down the elected government. And so there will be no stability and no security for the people. Remembering, of course, that all human communities want to have security, want to live in peace. But these people have other objectives. They want power for themselves. They lost the power through the democratic process. And now, again, through democratic rights, they want to negate the result of the democratic process. And so you see, after the downfall of the tyrant, after the election by majority of a new government, the minority would then disrupt the whole nation through continuous demonstration, sometimes through violence, even through killing, maybe burning houses and buildings. They would do anything in order to bring down the majority government. This is because in the newly democratic countries, we do not fully appreciate the system. While we say we like democracy, we only like it if we win. We don't like it when we lose. the important thing about a democracy is that you must be willing to lose. If in an election that you lose the election, you accept that you have lost the election. In the older democracies, you see sometimes a government having a small majority, but the minority accepts that that party has won and has a right to set up the government. One good example or bad example was when President Bush contested in the election, in his first election, the younger Bush. Actually, he lost the election, but through manipulation of the courts decided that he won the election. But in other countries, I am quite sure people will take to the streets throughout the country to bring down this president who has been made a president not through actually achieving majority, but through a court that is somehow or other linked somewhat to maybe his family. So, but in this developed country, even though it was quite possible that this man did not really win the election, it was the courts which gave him the right to rule the country, they did not do anything. But supposing these things happen in a new democratic country, what will happen is that the dissatisfied minority will do everything they can to bring down that government which has a small majority or which was put in place through some manipulation. There will be lots of demonstration, there will be general strikes, there will be violence, there will be even assassination, killing and all that. So the benefit of democracy is not tasted or enjoyed by the people, because democracy has actually destabilized their society and they begin to experience a very unstable state where their lives and their way of life is not as they wanted it to be. So this conflict between the winner and the loser in society will go on, because now we have the problem of foreign countries with vested interests wanting to achieve a regime change, and they make use of the minority, provided them with money, with support, and with all kinds of newspaper propaganda in order for this minority to overthrow the majority and set up a government which is friendly towards the financing country, the country supporting the minority. Then that is the kind of regime change they want to achieve. And after the regime change and the minority party sets up the government, there will be no security, there will be no stability, because now the majority would want to make use of the rights of democracy to demonstrate, to hold strikes and bring down the government. You see this happening mainly in new democracies in developed countries. You see in one case, one government being elected and put into place, and the losers will then hold demonstrations throughout the country, have a general strike, paralyze the whole country's economy, and bring down the government, have another election, and in another election, the people who brought down the government would win and set up their own government, only to find that the government which had been thrown down or defeated will now use the same democratic rights to hold demonstrations, to hold strikes, general strikes, and even to employ violence to bring down this government which had in the past brought them down. So there will be no stability. You can even see governments being elected, put in place, 2 years later, before they can do anything, they would be brought down and replaced with the other government, and that government too will face the same problem and be brought down, and then this another government will be set up, and they too will be brought down. So these conflicts continue as there will be no conciliation. Another instance is where parties have actually got factions in the parties. And when the party with a faction, one faction leader wins, the other faction leader wants to be prime minister and would undermine the government of the faction leader who won, to bring him down, replace it with their faction leader, and then the other factions in the party will bring him down to replace him with another faction leader, and so it goes on. Every 2 years there would be a change of government, there would be instability, and the conflict continues ad infinitum. Well, the answer to that is for people to understand that in a democracy, you have to accept the results of election. If the majority, if some party obtains a majority, it must be given the right to rule the country at least for the whole term, unless of course you see the government of this party so bad that you have to bring it down before it does more damage. If you accept losing in a democracy, then democracy will work, and the conflicts will be there, but they will not lead to violence and disruptions and the threats to the security of the people. But that is within the country. Then there is the problem between countries. Countries always have problem with their neighbors. They will have claims by neighbors on their territory, which the neighbor regard as them claiming the neighbor's territory by them. So both sides will claim territory, or even the seas, because today the seas may have oil resources, etc. So there will be conflict between nations. Now how do we solve this conflict? Perhaps we should go to war, fight each other, kill each other. The cost of war to both sides will be much more than whatever resource that you may get from the island or the seas that is being disputed. And today's wars are terrible because more people are killed, because we are so very clever in inventing newer weapons that can kill more people more efficiently. That is the measure of our so-called modern civilization. We have developed means of killing people more than our ancestors or our primitive forebears. But war is not going to solve anything. It will cause both sides to lose. So if there is no war, how do you decide? How do you settle a conflict? I would like to mention Malaysia's experience. Not because I am a Malaysian, but because it is a good experience. Now Malaysia has got 5 neighbors on its borders, bordering Malaysia. There are 5 neighbors. We have Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Brunei. They are very close neighbors. They have a common border with us. And almost all of them have got problems about claiming part of Malaysia's, what is considered by Malaysia to be Malaysian. They all have claims on them. We could have gone to war. We could have bought a lot of fighter planes and bombs and rockets and go to war and fight them so that we can retain our property, our rights. But Malaysia decided not to go to war. It's because we are cowards. We don't like to go to war. We don't like to be killed. We don't like to be wounded. And therefore, we try to solve our problem through other means, through peaceful means. Among the first things that we did was to try and work out some kind of relationship with our neighbors. And so we created ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. There are 10 Southeast Asian nations, and Malaysia is one of them and has conflicts with 5 others. So, having become a member of ASEAN, we now can meet the ASEAN leaders. There is a Malay saying that tak kenal maka tak cinta. If you don't know people, you don't love people. You have to know people. You know, when you sometimes have ill feelings against someone, but then he comes up to you, shakes your hand and says, how are you? You look well and all that. You soften up a little bit. So when you form ASEAN, it enables the leaders of Malaysia and its neighbors to come together, to sit down and talk to each other, not like enemies, but as members of the same group. That's the first step. We came together and decided that we should know each other. Now, having known each other, we turn our attention to the conflicts between us. There is firstly the conflict with Thailand, between Malaysia and Thailand, where a triangular bit of sea on the northeast coast is claimed by both Thailand and Malaysia. We tried to negotiate and told Thailand, look, this is our sea, not yours. But Thailand says, no, it is our sea, not yours. And we talk and talk and talk and talk for years and years. And then we had a nice Prime Minister in the person of my predecessor, Tun Hussein On. He established good relations with the Prime Minister of Thailand. At that time, I think it was General Kriamsa. And they got together and decided between the two of them, with the knowledge of their cabinet, that instead of having this claim bugging our relation forever, let's settle this claim. How to settle this claim? Well, their answer was, let's share. Let's share. This is the Malaysian approach to things. We always share. Kongsi in the Chinese. We like to share. Let's share 50-50. Anything that we get from the sea in that area will be shared 50-50 between Thailand and Malaysia. And we ratified that agreement. Today, that area produces a lot of gas. It is produced by Petronas and it is shared between Thailand and Malaysia 50-50. No war. We haven't killed a single Thai, nor have the Thais killed a single Malay. That's a resolution to conflict, conciliation. We decided that we should share, and that's the end of conflict. Today, no one talks about it anymore, and we are enjoying the benefits from the production of gas, both Malaysia and Thailand. Then we have a problem with Indonesia, our other neighbor. They are a big country, population 240 million. Malaysia is a tiny country with a population of 24-25 million. We are 1/10 their size. Obviously, we cannot go to war against them. You see, they just have to walk over us and that's the end of us. So, what do? We negotiated with them. We told them, look, you have 17,000 islands. Can't you agree that these 2 islands out of 17,000 belong to Malaysia? Very reasonable. This was during my time when I was Prime Minister. And of course, for nasty things, I always send my deputy. So I sent my deputy, Tun Ghaffar Baba, to go and see President Suharto and told Suharto, you have 17,000 islands. We are claiming only 2. You don't feel anything. The answer was different. The answer was, not one square inch of Indonesia will be surrendered to Malaysia. Oh, very strong. So what do we do? Well, I decided to build up a big Air Force, armed forces, and fight against Indonesia. But I did not do that. I had the authority as Prime Minister to do silly things, but I didn't. So we haggled and haggled with Indonesia, and finally we said, look, we can never reach agreement. The only way to do this thing is to take the matter to the World Court. But both of us must agree that we take the matter to the World Court. And so we did. We went to the World Court. And the World Court, which is made up of very wise judges and all that, they decided that Sipadan and Ligatan belongs to Malaysia. Finish. No more conflict. Of course, Indonesians got long faces. Malaysians have a broad smile because we got this. And then there is this conflict with Singapore over a rock in the sea. It's not an island, it's a rock. We say it is ours. Singapore said it is theirs. I mean, with Singapore, we could have gone to war because it's a small place, only 5 million people. See, so we argued and argued, but we got nowhere. So finally, we agreed, we go to the World Court again. Both agreed, we will accept whatever the World Court decides. And we went there to the World Court and make our presentation. But you know, judges, sometimes they're not very smart. Can you imagine it? They awarded this rock to Singapore. Isn't it silly? It's Malaysian territory, but okay, since we have decided to accept the decision of the World Court, so we accepted. So that rock is now part of Singapore. Of course, they are tiny islands, so they need the rock. We can do without the rock. And then we have a dispute with Brunei. There we, Brunei speak the same language as we do. They are small and we talk with them. Eventually, we decided, okay, we'll operate this place together. It is yours, but we operate. So that settles the problem. Then there is the Philippines claim to Sabah, not British, not Borneo. They say it is theirs, we say it is ours. A lot of people are there. They can come and take it if they want, but I think they have decided not to take it. But on the other hand, it is a nice political issue for politicians in the Philippines, even though they know that they can't get it. It's good to keep the thing alive. So they get popular by claiming that they have a right to Sabah. We don't mind because they don't do anything about it. So that's a way of solving conflicts between nations. It's through negotiation. If that fails, we can go for arbitration. If that fails, we can go to the World Court. I hope we never have to go to war with our neighbors. So, we accept reality. We accept that there are things we can do and there are things that we cannot do. And we accept what we cannot do, we will not do. What we can do, we will do. And going to war is something that we cannot do because we are cowards. We don't want to die in war. We want to live and enjoy life. So, if there is any lesson to be learned on conflicts and conciliation, the Malaysian government, I offer you the Malaysian solution. It is a good solution. We are very happy that we played some role in reconciling the people in southern Philippines with their central government. And if there is anything we can do in order to reconcile people in conflict, we would like to do because we love peace and we hate war. War is very primitive. War justifies the conflicts in the past among primitive people. They don't know anything better. We call ourselves civilized people. And yet what do? We declare war. Sometimes we don't even declare war, we just kill people. Just imagine in our society, if you have a difference between two of you, the way to solve it, you take a gun and shoot the other person. That is before he shoots you. You see, so what kind of society would there be if people can kill people who are in conflict with them? There will be no real security for anyone, or even for the man who probably is very skilled at shooting and killing. He will kill his opponent, but he himself will be killed by others. I thank you.